Mr. Mason West.
Welcome in, everyone, to this episode of Bare Bones. I am Mason West, and joined friend of the podcast. Well, honestly, he's on this so much, might be a cousin of the podcast at least. we got Q from Buckus Stats. Q, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Doing good. I am. After reviewing the tape this week, I'm strongly considering starting a GoFundMe for the statue for Bill Murray outside Soldier Field. So that's what's on my mind right now.
Honestly, between Doug Kramer, between him, I don't know which cult I really want to be a part of, but I mean, they're both pretty good. And I'm actually really excited. There's a section of the show where I'm going to lean on you and your O-line expertise to kind of discuss what is happening with this Bears O-line, and Bill Murray, I'm sure, will come up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm for anyone out there who might not know, I spend like my free time Monday, Tuesday watching the O-line tape, putting out clips on Twitter of like my opinions of how the O-line played. And then on Wednesday, I publish an article every week over at ontapsportsnet.com. And then that night, me and my co-host, Ron Luce, who played O-line at St. Xavier in college, we sit down and go through the tape, and, you know, on YouTube, we're sitting there marking it all up. So make sure to check that out if you are interested in offensive line.
I mean, honestly, I find what you do to be an invaluable resource. There's not enough people like that look into and talk about and are actually insightful on offensive line play. So if I could just get like you and Brandon Thorne in the same room and just chat about Bears O-line all the time, I mean, that would be nirvana.
I'd learn so much from him. It would be great. I mean, I tell my co-host at Bears on Tap, who I do the O-line shows with, I tell him after like every episode, I'm like, the world needs more good O-line content because no one makes it except for Brandon Thorne. It's like there needs to be more of this because no one seems to understand it either.
Well, that's the thing, like, and not to make this an offensive line show, but now like it's just so important. I mean, like, if you have a bad offensive line or a really good one, I mean, Bears fans firsthand have seen this, how detrimental it can be to your hopes and dreams for your NFL season. And we just put it in the background like it's whatever. But in all reality, this should be the first and foremost. People should know how duo works and should know, right, how offensive line, you know, how pass offs work in terms of, you know, pass protection. And it's just not really discussed.
No, it's really not. And it's like, you know, as you start to get to know something well, you go through these phases of knowledge where it's like, okay, you feel strongly this way. And then a year later, you're going to learn a bunch more. You're going to feel like, oh, well, I was kind of wrong on that. And like, I feel like the phase I'm in right now is just feeling like there is such a difference between a talented offensive line and a good offensive line. And like, it's not even just Bears specific, but it's like, you look at the Bengals. Bengals have a ton of talent on their offensive line. They're not good. You look at like the 49ers. The 49ers outside Trent Williams. And I mean, the rookie Dominic Puny's been playing really well for them. But the outside of that, and for years, the last like 4 years, they felt like a bunch of 4 random guys in Trent Williams every year. And it was like, but they were so well coached and they knew what they were doing so well. And they knew their identity. And the offense leaned into it constantly. And there's so many factors that go into good offensive line play that I'm finding really interesting to really think through how it all works together.
Well, and it's so interesting when you talk about how they're coached. I mean, you have a guy like Bill Callahan, who's held up as like the godfather of offensive line play. I mean, there's a reason why, besides just his son being a son, but why his son stole him away over to Tennessee. And I think that's a big, I mean, I was a big JC Latham guy. He was my number 2 tight end of that, offensive tackle in that draft anyway. But he was just such a guy that you saw so much potential in, but you weren't 100% sure if that would carry over just because he's this globe on legs. But
you got the Evan Neal effect. It was like, he's got the power, he's got the demeanor, but will that foot speed be an issue? Like that, that's where I felt at least. But Callahan's son, Brian Callahan. That was my first choice for Bears offensive coordinator. And then he got hired as a head coach. It's like, well, crap. I was really banking on the idea that he needed to call plays somewhere before he could become a head coach, but that went out the door pretty quick.
Well, shifting over to a little Bears Jaguars or chart review, just a little look at some stuff that's happened this week. First and foremost, Jaguars typically depart Thursday night for a Friday morning arrival when playing in London. They do this every single year. I mean, they are the London team essentially. At least that's what Shad Khan I think would want to have if he had his druthers. But they expect to arrive later Friday than originally planned because of Hurricane Milton, which made landfall in Sarasota, Florida. If you're in Florida, hopefully everything's okay. You know, obviously, a Category 3 storm on Wednesday that eventually weakened, but still pretty strong Category 1. As of Thursday morning, a storm surge warning remains in effect along the coast from East Central Florida northward towards southern Georgia. Bears left Monday night, but for what I thought, and we discussed this previously on the last show, that they were doing so because, right, I mean, it's the circadian rhythm, how important it is to get across those time zones. Every time zone you cross, you need about a day and a half to recover. So 3 time zones would be 3 days, if not a little bit more. Jaguars just knew the hurricane was coming, didn't do anything about it, and now are leaving late. There hasn't been an official word if they have left yet. This seems like a just bad organizational failure.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm sitting here. I heard something today that for the last, I think it was 4 years, they've left on Thursday. So it's like that. That's clearly the way that they see it, like that they should operate. There's a slight chance it might be financially oriented or something, as far as like how much they have to pay for them to be over there for an extra week almost, or 4 days, whatever that would be. With Shad Khan, I don't think that's the case, the way he doles out money in free agency. So they clearly think that that's the best strategy for them. But like with the hurricane, I'm surprised there wasn't an adjustment, unless it came down to the idea of like, our guys have houses in Jacksonville. Our guys' kids go to schools in Jacksonville. We need to make sure our guys have time to take care of their families before this thing hits, and to hell with football. Like that's the only logic that I have for why they would do it this way.
That is entirely possible. No idea if that's the case. If that is the case, as a not Jaguars fan, if I was a Jaguars fan, I think I would have sat there and been like, hey, can you just like give me an explanation as to what's going on here? Like, especially because if I'm a Jaguars fan, there's a good chance I'm living also in Florida. And unfortunately, I have this hurricane I'm mentally dealing with. Give me a little ray of sunshine from you as the Jaguars organization. Explain to me why there's a good chance, right, that you are not leaving on time. But, that's obviously there are more important things than football. And just hopefully if you are in Florida, if you were affected by this hurricane, hopefully everything is okay. Specifically more Bears, Matt Eberflus says Elijah Hicks will fill in for Jaquan Brisker in Sunday's game against the Jaguars. I had tweeted out pretty much that first day on Monday that I didn't believe he would even make the trip, and that there would be no way he's going to all of a sudden make a separate exodus over to London to play. I was surprised that Elijah Hicks was named the fill-in, and I believe you were as well.
Yeah, because I see Hicks as more of a free safety mold. And I mean, evidently he's second on the depth chart as their box safety guy, more of Jaquan Brisker's role. I mean, I'm sure they want their safeties to be pretty interchangeable, but you look at Byard and Brisker, and they're just clearly different players. So I would think that John, like when this offseason, I had a Packers writer, he goes by Badger Noonan on Twitter, come on our show to talk about the Packers and what to expect from them this year, how to game plan for them, just like a preview to like what, basically for the first Packers game. I'm going to go right back to that preview and listen to it again and be like, oh, I got all this good info. But anyways, that's besides the point. We got to the point of talking about Jonathan Owens, and he was like, don't play him outside the box. That's all I know. So like, I'm really confused as to why, if a Packers fan who like is in it, writing about them weekly, watching tape, looking at the numbers, is telling me he's a box safety, I'm a little confused as to why he's not your number 2 box safety.
And at least that's what I thought I saw when it came down to snap counts, and when it came to, preseason stuff, and when we did on the field in the preseason. I mean, he sticks his nose in there. I mean, he's not obviously quite as good as Jaquan Brisker, but I mean, he'll put his nose where it's supposed to be and put a hat on you, excuse me. And like you said, I definitely saw Elijah a bit more as that deeper safety, free safety, kind of ranging around a little bit. And I also just haven't really seen as much consistency as I'd like out of Elijah Hicks too. I mean, just purely talent for talent. If you remove the position aspect out of it, I haven't loved what I saw from him. Now, at the end of the day, we'll see what the snap counts are during this game, because yes, Elijah may be the starter, but there's a good chance Jonathan Owens does get some snaps, or even out snaps Elijah. It just kind of depends.
I almost wonder if the Bears feel like they want to get more split safety action going, and they feel like Hicks can offer more deep field, like half field coverages than a guy like Owens can, where, they bend the defense a little bit for Brisker, I think, from what they want to do, because he's such an effective buzz safety, right? Coming downhill. But like when he's not there, maybe they want to be more split safety, and they think that Hicks gives that to them.
Well, and obviously everyone talks about the Bears being a cover 2 team, and when you look at it, they actually don't play nearly as much cover 2 as you would think, like just because Eberflus has evolved. To give him credit where credit is due.
I think you look at that entire branch of coaches, like a cover 2 coach or a Tampa 2 like root coach is mostly a cover 3 team at this point. But what Tampa 2 or cover 2 is, like why people say that, it's the mentality. It's hits. It's the coaching process that they have falls into that same bucket as Tony Dungy had down in Tampa. And I think that's really what it is when you say a cover 2 coach.
And I think you hit the nail on the head there. I'm glad you said that about maybe they do want to play a little bit more, split safety. Because when you look at the construction of this Jaguars team, the way they've been successful is Brian Thomas. And we'll talk about this more, but if you actually make them kind of dink and dunk down the field, they just absolutely fall apart. And they, there is a decent amount of speed on that Jaguars team. Where you talk about Brian Thomas, you talk about Tank Bigsby, Travis Etienne out of the backfield too. So having that extra safety valve in a deep half or part of a deep third might be important this game.
Yeah, I think so. I think that makes sense. And I was going to say something, but I realized I'm going to talk about it later, so I'm just going to leave it.
Other news, DJ Moore says that Caleb Williams has been more bossy lately. That's him being a leader. He's like a little bro. Dude, don't be talk to me like that. And then I took his advice, said DJ. So I have a love-hate relationship with this. I like the jesting that was going on. If you look, actually, Caleb was in the room when he said this. Cool, was kind of poking. DJ was poking at Caleb. At the same time, there's a little truth to it, right? I think you did see that DJ was, kind of big bro and Caleb a little bit, and he admitted that as much, and said, "Hey, I should listen to him more. I got 2 touchdowns out of it." So there's a learning curve, just like we all do for any professional aspect of our lives. I myself, it's been interesting now that I'm a clinic director at my job, and the idea of being a clinic director and managing and giving orders, I guess, to potentially an older physical therapist that is working as a staff PT under me. I don't know, like, how that jives. Like, it is different. It's a different mentality to have. So, and when you think about who DJ's played with so far, he hasn't really had that big quarterback who, is going to lead the way. So, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, even going back to college, he was probably the guy on those rosters. I just pulled up the Maryland rosters that he was on. I mean, Max Bortenschlager was his main quarterback his final year. Jake Funk was there as a running back. That's a fun name.
Hey, Jake Funk.
I remember that name. But yeah, he even going back to college, he spent a little time with Cam Newton. I think like 1 year they actually played together because of injuries thereafter. But he's never really played with a quarterback who spreads the ball around either. It's been kind of his roles outside of that first year in Carolina when he's a rookie. So I think that does take a little time to get used to. And you throw on the lack of offensive success on top of it, guys are going to be frustrated.
Yeah, to err is to be human, and don't measure us by what we do at our worst. See how we come back from it and how we shift and change. Now, Ryan Poles also spoke, and we talked about this a little bit in the green room before we popped in here. It's been very cool to see how Ryan Poles handles himself with the media, and you can like what he's done with the team, you can not like what he's done with the team, but one thing he has done is been very open and honest and very communicative about what he does and why he does it. One thing he talked about, in terms of Shane Waldron during the critical kind of early point of the season, Poles said that he liked Waldron's openness. He said, we all, from a scouting to coaching, we all have these philosophies, but at the end of the day, it's about the players and putting them in a position to be successful. So just identifying where Caleb's at in his process. Do we need to slow it up? Do we need to speed it down? Do we need to make decisions like getting into a no huddle and tempo situation so he can get in a rhythm? I really liked, the fact that he spoke at all, which because you don't see that from the Bears GMs consistently, and B, not just with Poles, but also with Waldron, there's they own what they do, right? And are willing to admit, okay, I need a change. And I think you saw that with Waldron, where he came out in a very particular way. This is how I want to run an offense. Saul wasn't working and has been making changes over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's there is value to that accountability in the building. And I think Poles wears whatever he does, like you said. And there is a nice aspect to hearing from him more often and how honest he is about stuff. Like he's very tell it like it is, but on occasion I feel like I wish he held back a little more, but like he's really a pretty open book. And I think that's generally a good thing, especially I can't help but wonder who told him when he got this job to not have secrets with the media. Someone must have. I mean, he has some branches to Chris Ballard, which goes back to Jerry Angelo. Chris Ballard was in Chicago for a long time. He's close with Chris Ballard. So I'm thinking maybe Chris Ballard told him something like that about the Chicago media. They'll tear you up if they think you're lying or they think you're withholding stuff. But I think someone told him something along those lines for him to be as honest as he's been since he got here.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. And like I said, like you don't need every single thing that he's saying, even from a competitive advantage. But at the same time, like I go back to the Chase Claypool trade, and he talked about that afterwards, and he talked about how hard he took it in terms of how that trade went. And I think that, at least for me as a Bears fan, I know for some other ones, again, the whole to err is to be human thing, it'd be a little different if you don't want that person pounding the table and say, like, I thought that was the move at the time, that's the move we made, and move on, or to try to justify it. He's like, nope, that was the wrong move. And he continues to do that time in and time out. The last little bit we want to hit on is the Kevin Warren conversation update on the stadium. In all reality, the update is there is no update. Kevin Warren went on to say the theoretical next step is to continually work forward and ultimately get approval from a political standpoint. And there's some political milestones upcoming. You have a fall veto session. You have a session in January. You have a session next year. So there are steps, but we want to make sure that we're prepared at this point in time. But I feel I go back and look at my notes when I even started this job in regards to the stadium, right where we are right now is where I thought we would be. That's very the political answer from Kevin Warren. I don't think this is where they thought they would be, especially with the whole Arlington Heights aspect. I mean, in theory, if they really, really wanted to, I mean, they could put a dirt in the shovel tomorrow in Arlington Heights they own the land. It's just, it seems right now that they're just focused on Chicago.
There was still tax stuff there that they were not eye to eye with, and I'm not sure how important that stuff really is. But when you heard George McCaskey made some comments about this today too that I caught just at some point this afternoon, just like I was just had YouTube on while I was working, and I just remember hearing what he said and thinking, yeah, they don't want to be in Arlington Heights. Like the way he said what he said, it was just like, yeah, Arlington's an option, but blah 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 on the lakefront and in the city. Like it was just like they want this like that. It feels to me like Arlington Heights was kind of a mistake for them from wherever that might have rooted from, and they're just holding it until they're sure they can get a buyer on it, and they're sure about the stadium that they don't need a backup plan.
Were there any other storylines going into this week that you want to touch on before we move on?
I think I'm mostly good. I'll just say one more thing on the Kevin Warren aspect. I see people who are like frustrated at how much he talks sometimes, and I'm glad Kevin Warren's here. I think Kevin Warren is good for this organization. I really do. I don't think every time he speaks, there's much to hear.
A lot of words.
But the guy's goal, he stated this, his goal is to become commissioner in the NFL. If I want to become commissioner in the NFL, I need to be in front of cameras. I need to be talking because my competition is not doing that. And then I'll be in the minds of NFL owners as I've seen that guy. He handles himself well. So like that, if his goal is NFL commissioner, I think he's doing a good job of trying to reach that goal.
I was going to say, I mean, this just all seems like a hopeful for him springboard to NFL commissioner. Mm-hmm. And if you think of when Roger Goodell talks, he talks very similarly to Kevin Warren. It's a lot of non-answers because that's his job. Goodell's there to be the meat shield that is in front of the owners and just to, kind of the almost Bill Belichick, we're moving on to Miami, like that kind of a thing. And yeah, it's a lot of word salad. It's you don't get a lot of info on it, but he gets stuff done. Whether you agreed with how things went with COVID, and college football during his time there, whether you agree with what's been going on in terms of what he was doing at Hard Knocks. Like, no, I didn't need to see him picking out chairs that for a stadium that doesn't exist. But at the end of the day, as long as he gets stuff done, that's all I care about. And as of right now, not enough time has gone by for me to not think he's going to do that.
Yeah, agreed.
Training room roundup. This is where we look at, for the Bears and Jaguars, what's going on with some of those injuries. I mean, we already talked about Jaquan Brisker. He's out. He's just chilling in Chicago right now.
Which hurts.
It sucks. If there was a game that I want him back for, luckily, though, this one I think they can survive without having him there. Zach Pickens, Terrell Smith, both not participating, are also out. You see some good stuff. Kyler Gordon was full. Jacob Martin was full. We'll talk about him in one moment, but Tevin Jenkins went from being limited with that ankle, right? He left last week and was replaced by Pro Bowler Bill Murray, or at least that's how many Bears fans are acting. But he did not practice today. Now, I still think there's a chance that he plays this week. We'll ultimately see what that looks like. You don't love going from limited to not participating, but in terms of ankle specifically, it makes sense that he could still come back with that. Just, you need some time. If you flew over, transatlantic, that ankle's going to act up. Because when you really think about it too, that was it the Tuesday one? It was like an estimated. They didn't even practice. They did a
Right.
Wednesday one. They did a walkthrough. So it's not even exactly accurate anyway.
Right. And well, so Wednesdays was an estimate. Was today's allowed to be an estimate as well? Because if not, they could be saying, well, yeah, if we didn't travel this far and have all this different stuff going on around it, he might have been limited, but we just didn't want to take the chance because we've been through all this. He went on the flight. He's probably dehydrated from the flight relative to normal levels. And why risk it by having him practice? If they can't estimate today's, I think that makes more sense too.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I think for him in particular, in this situation, you need to just wait till Friday to see what that looks like. Now, whether or not you want Tevin on the O-line is another question. Obviously, there's a lot of conversation going on around O-line construction. You can have that conversation. I find it interesting, Jacob Martin, where does he fit on this team? Like, I'm just with the trade that you had for Darrell Taylor, with the slight emergence of Austin Booker, and you don't want to take reps from him, where does Jacob Martin fit?
Dude lost his job. I mean, you lose your job to injury sometimes. It sucks, but that's the way I'm seeing this. I mean, if I'm looking at their edge rushers who, like, let's see here. Daniel Hardy's only played 5 snaps on defense. So it's not like there's much to eat into there. And Austin Booker, like you said, you don't want to take the developmental reps away. He's been performing decently well. Maybe you might have some sicko packages with Martin where you're saying, okay, we're getting him, Taylor, and 2 small defensive tackles out there, but it just feels really limited either way.
Yeah, to anyone that tells you that you can't lose your job to injury, you can't get Wally pipped, they're lying to you. You can't lose your job to injury. So, hey, coming from your favorite physical therapist, stay on your stuff and get stuff checked out early and often. You don't want to lose that early. Mercedes Lewis didn't participate just because he's old and got a rest day. And then Tyreek was limited. I don't expect that to be an issue. I mean, yes, it popped up all of a sudden with the calf. I always like to implore people to realize too, limited, especially when you had nothing the day before, it could mean that he just sat out a drill or two. It could also mean he got hurt halfway through the practice and then could not finish it. That is still technically limited. So wait and see what happens there with the injury report on Friday, tomorrow.
Yeah. And is that something that usually the reporters might put out sooner than, like, if he got hurt in practice, you'd kind of start to hear about it on Twitter through some reporter who was there, but maybe not this week?
Yeah, if they saw it, they can pretty much report it. But now, in terms of what parts of practice they're allowed to watch and everything like that, it's so limited at this point that I would doubt that would happen. And you would basically have to have someone get slipped some info from either a player or coaching staff, et cetera, that to hear that happened. And usually they're very selective of when they allow that information out.
I got a question for you. What do you think happened with Zach Pickens? Because we knew he was hurt. He came back and played the Houston game, and he's been out since, but he didn't get put on IR, and it just feels like it feels like a weird situation that he just keeps getting DNPs and is just out. Do you think he got like that groin injury got way worse in the Texans game in his 7 snaps, or like?
Yeah, groin's really tough. Usually, when you're talking groin, you're talking specifically either pelvic floor or adductor longus. Sometimes even it's Dave Montgomery dealt with that. It was the sports hernia, which is just again the adductor groove going up and attaching to that butt bone. That one is one of those similar in a way to like that hamstring strain where you could feel like really, really good. And then all of a sudden you get that eccentric load through it, just that rapid lengthening, and you just restrain it. And then it could be worse than what it was originally. The problem is too, it depends on what your ramp up looks like, so are you ever truly going 100% in practice? A lot of people would say no, just because, you're kind of babying it a little bit if it is injured, or also, game speed and practice speed are also two very different things. So yes, I would expect that during one, maybe even two reps of those 7 that he got, again, eccentric load, probably too much loading into that. Now, in terms of why he's not being put on IR, I would think it's a combination of what their hope is in terms of him being able to come back and hopefully come back a little sooner, because they are so thin on that defensive line that if he can come back in 3 weeks instead of 4, that 1 week difference might be just enough that they're willing to wait, because their defense lineup is so atrocious. And they also do have, ultimately, there's still limits in terms of how many people can return from IR. And they unfortunately, the Bears, right early had some people on there. You still have Larry Borum, who might come back at some point. Would be Ryan Bates still at some point you want to come back. So they also just may not necessarily want to have to potentially use one of those return from IRs.
That makes sense. And do you remember what Jacob Martin's injury was? Because I just noticed it says toe on here, and he's missed 5 games with a toe injury, and that just feels like weird to me. And I know nothing about toe ligaments, about like any toe injuries. That just feels odd to me.
If I recall correctly, it was essentially, I was thinking it was a turf toe kind of a thought process. And whenever you are talking about any foot ligament in general, it's tough because.
And is turf toe a ligament?
Yes. And so at the end of the day, like turf toe is like the very general term, but like it's you sprain the big toe of your metatarsophalangeal joint. And when you think about just even walking, right, how much bend you need in that toe, you put a lot of stress through that. So normally you end up being put in a boot. If you're put in a boot for even 2 weeks or so, now the foot gets weaker, it gets tighter. And so you have to now not just recover from the issue in the toe, you have to come back from not using that whole foot.
Your whole ankle range of motion is probably just way off. Okay. That makes sense.
So, and that's like, even if it's not specifically turf toe, that's more or less like, even if you had like maybe a dislocated a bone within the foot that you sprained a different ligament in, that's kind of the same trajectory. So, we think of toe as relatively inconsequential when you hear it's a toe, but just because of how much force gets put through it and what you need to do to recover from it, that's where you end up IR would make sense for him.
Okay. Interesting. I'm talking to a doctor right now, so this is my chance to ask all the questions I've had.
Absolutely. That's what I'm here for. Jacksonville, we're not going to spend a ton of time on because they just have their Wednesday, and then we have no idea what's going on because of their whole flight situation. So all of these could be kind of for naught. They have a lot of people on here that do matter for their team. Everyone, a lot of limiteds, no one specifically out or anything, but Gabe Davis was limited with a knee, Evan Ingram with a hamstring, so he may actually not play. Darnell Savage, limited with a quadricep, even at Travis Etienne with a shoulder, and Yasir Abdullah and Devin Lloyd, they're 2 linebackers with a neck and a knee respectively. So all those people could absolutely play this upcoming weekend. Maybe not Evan Ingram, and they could also, you might have a guy out or two. Just unfortunately, because of their weird schedule and issues getting to London, I wouldn't put too much stock either way into these.
Well, and there's one that stands out loudly to me is Tyson Campbell, because they just opened his window and he was already a limited participant, and they just paid him a bunch of money. He's a really good football player. So like that to me leaves potential for like if Tyson Campbell is back out there, their secondary gets infinitely better.
Yeah, and there's a point later where I talk about their secondary a little bit, but because it's not been great for the most part. Their corners have been okay, but it overall has not been great.
Tyson Campbell only played week 1. He got hurt in week 1, so he hasn't been out there.
That is something definitely to keep an eye on, as hopefully we get some information throughout today and then tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right, we got a quick break here, and then we're going to dive into some of our categories.
Ooh. Okay.
Crisp.
Whoa.
That's really good.
That one's really good too.
That was good.
That's like,
It's so refreshing. Like, it's so good to have right before we go play.
And it has,
like
like,
it
the-
really quenches your thirst.
and it has the right amount of bitterness where it kind of
Yeah,
like.
it's like not too sweet, not too bitter. That's what we were saying with the last one.
I like that. Mango
This one,
turmeric.
this one,
is my favorite.
this one's the best. This one's
No,
the best.
That one. Guys, we're gonna have to
no,
argue
no, I
over
like
this.
this
It's
one.
that one.
No,
I like that
this
one.
one's so good. This one's
I
so
actually,
good.
I used to drink
that one.
kombucha
This one is good.
5 a.m. before practice every day because it woke me up and it made me feel good before practice.
All right, that was a video from your Chicago Lions professional women's rugby team. They are sponsored by and drink kombucha. Kombucha is a premium performance-focused kombucha crafted specifically for athletes and active individuals. This revitalizing beverage blends traditional benefits of kombucha with nutritional enhancements to support energy, hydration, and recovery. Made from organic teas and infused with natural electrolytes, kombucha offers a delicious and effective solution to maintain peak performance. Better athletic performance, increased nutrient absorption, improved wellness, and improved cognitive stamina. Kombucha. Use code BearsGutCheck at the checkout to get a discount. All right. Knee-jerk reaction. Coming into this week, Q, what is your knee-jerk reaction?
Bill Murray might be the best offensive guard on the roster based on what I've seen this year. Knee jerk. I'm not going to sit here and say like that I 100% believe this, but he has the best technique of any guard on the roster. Like it's not close based on what he put on tape against the Panthers. And Grant, technique can change when you're going up against better opponents. Like you're not going to be able to take as much time to get into your sets the way that you have to and get your hands where you need them to be. But his feet alone are so clean. I was raving on the stream last night about like when this guy was pulling, he was so tight to the line of scrimmage. It was just like, I hadn't seen a Bears guard do that. It'll be that close in my 1.5 years now of watching every game for O-line tape. I hadn't seen a guy be that efficient in his path and stick his target. Like there were just a lot of little things that he did so well that I really hope we get to see more of him. I hope that he lives up to it because he lives up to not the opinion that everyone has out there right now, but to the tape that he put out there because he put out really good tape.
And that was definitely something I wanted to dive into because I thought for the most part, that's what I saw. That's what I felt, that the way that he played was very clean in terms of that footwork, like you talked about, but also the tenacity that is there. If you go back and look at highlights from that game, I mean, there's one play where he blocks 3 different dudes. And to highlight that even more so, unfortunately, one of the dudes that he went to go block was Braxton's guy. Then he goes to get someone else, and Braxton doesn't finish the block, even though like he had help from Bill Murray.
Well, I guess the full way to say it was, so he's the free man on the line. There's 4 guys coming. And so he's helping Shelton at first. And then he notices Braxton falling backwards in the pocket. So he hustles over there, puts Braxton's guy in the dirt, hustles back to Shelton, puts Shelton's guy in the dirt, and then goes after the guy that Pryor's blocking too. And it's just like, and then, like you said, Braxton let his guy get back up. Should have sat on him. Should have just fallen right on top of him.
Yeah.
But let him get up and let him get to Caleb, and that part sucked.
And so when you combine the storyline, and again, this guy was a different defensive lineman before, so it's not like even he's been doing offensive line this entire time. We are it is well known that the Bears have done this before in terms of having a guy convert. Coward was not very good when he went from D-line to O-line.
Just let's hope it's Big Cat James Williams.
So I am very excited to see what Bill Murray can do. And because at this point, if you look at the current construction of the team and what you can do this year, there's not a lot you can do within the team. And even looking ahead, you may not be able to help this offensive line as much as you might think going into next year, just between what the draft might look like. And honestly, free agency is not something I'm excited about next year.
there's a slim chance that he is a major asset going into next season because it's one less spot you have to fill. If you can feel good about that, that is awesome. That is exciting. And for him, he's in the same situation. He's 27. He's not a prospect with upside. He's a guy who needs to do it right now because he might never get another chance. No team's going to give him a starting role next year based on what he's shown just this. They might give him a chance to compete, but again, that leaves stuff up to risk. The guy hasn't been paid anything. So this is his chance right now. You are playing the lottery to try to get another chance. This is it.
And I expect him, if you see the effort that he had last Sunday, I expect him to try to take advantage fully of this opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
My knee-jerk reaction is I am fully drinking the Bears Kool-Aid. I truly believe that this is a team that can make a push for a wild card spot, that this is a team that you are not going to want to play when it comes playoff time as things start to click. I mean, the last 10 quarters for Caleb Williams, he has got 70.1 completion percentage, 7.9 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, and 109.8 passer rating. You flip to the other side of the ball. The defense is one of the best teams in terms of EPA per play allowed in both the run and the pass. Pass a bit better than the run right now. If you can combine those, a functional offense with a defense that is that dominant, that this team is definitely one that should be very interesting going forward, even when you are in one of the, if not the hardest divisions in football.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be excited about right now. And I mean, the most exciting thing is Caleb's gotten better every week. I think you have some wrenches thrown at this week with the travel, but maybe not. And there's a lot going on with this roster right now to feel very excited about, very happy about, very optimistic about.
To be perfectly honest, this is just something that we are going to be brutally honest about. Mine is that this offense could really take another step this week, playing a Jaguars team that is tied for forcing the fewest turnovers with 2. They have 0 interceptions, have given up the most points with 141, second most yards with 1,967. And Aaron Lemming tweeted out at Aaron Lemming NFL, a quick look ahead to Sunday. Jacksonville's pass defense is bad. If you average out their current numbers allowed to opposing offenses over a 17-game season, here's what it would look like. 69.5% completion rate, 4,893 yards, 34 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and a 111.7 rating. So between a little bit of the resurgence hasn't been resurgence, but a resurgence from the Bears offense and how bad this Jaguars defense has been, this really could be another step forward for the offense.
Yeah, no, it could. There's a lot of opportunity there. The secondary has been bad. Today, I went through and tracked all the explosive plays they gave up. They're averaging something like 5 explosive pass plays a game, giving up 20 yards or more. So I mean, they've just been flat out bad.
What is to be perfectly honest?
So I want to preface this by saying I didn't even consider that I could pick something about the Jaguars in this. So I promise I'm not this big a pessimist, but the Bears' run defense kind of low-key terrifies me in this game particularly, because if I'm Jacksonville, I'm sitting there saying, if I'm Doug Peterson going, we just can't get anything going, but we're not running the ball. We're 28th in rush attempts. Maybe this week we go see if we can, force the issue on the ground a little bit with our 5.7 yard per carry average we have right now, which is second in the NFL. When they run the ball, they've been really efficient. We saw it last week with Tank Bigsby running through people. And when I'm really trying to be as honest as I can be about this, Brisker's a force player on your run defense. Brisker is a part of what makes the run defense work. He's not there. Elijah Hicks missed 7 of his 26 tackle attempts last year, and Tank Bigsby was running through people last week. So that does scare me a little.
I mean, yeah, the Jaguars are, rushing for, I believe it's 126.2 rushing yards per game. And we talked about it a little earlier. The main weakness right now on this Bears defensive line is depth out on the D-line. And if you don't have Dexter in there, who's not necessarily a great run defender anyway,
he's
but
good enough.
He's good enough. And if you don't have Andrew Billings in there, and for whatever reason, and I've said this on the show before, I do not understand their rotations. Why you take out 2 or more starters at one time. It makes no sense to me. But when you then have to rotate and you don't have Pickens, he's out. So you have Chris Williams and you have just guys at best. It's been a problem.
Yeah, Byron Coward, I think, is the guy playing next to Williams, and it's like they're both thinner guys as far as D tackles go. Like they're not the natural 300-pound build. They're the guys who probably had to beef up, had to get as heavy as they could to carry that mass. You know, they're the more pass rusher type. Neither of those guys are like Javon Dexter might have been born at 300 pounds. Like he just carries it. And Andrew Billings, like that dude belongs being big. Like there's no question. If he wasn't a football player, he's probably still 250. Like he's a house.
Yeah, and then even if you want to go one layer up, obviously you already talked about Brisker, but between the two, this year, Tremaine Edmonds has done so much better, than in previous years, but he's still not necessarily known as a run stopper. That's not what he does. That's not his role. So, if you're not hefty enough in the front, you don't got someone on the back end like Brisker who's going to clean up. I mean, TJ Edwards can only do so much. You're going to need Edmonds to step this up because you can't live like this.
Yeah, and I've loved what I've seen from Edmonds. But until I hear your co-host Danny say I was wrong about Tremaine Edmonds, I can't buy his run defense.
If you're a linebacker and Danny doesn't love you, you are doing something wrong. Well, ain't this humorous? There's something quirky or funny leading into this game. What do you got?
I'm just throwing it back to one of my first football memories of Keith Traylor picking off a football and running at 71 yards against the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2001. That play made me a football fan when I was 11 years old. So like, if you've never seen it, go to YouTube, type Keith Traylor interception, and you will not laugh harder this week. I promise you.
Mine, I'm going to keep it simple. In NFL London games, the favorites against the money line are 22, 11, and 1. So 65.6%. So if history says anything, when you combine that with the fact that I do truly think the Bears are a better football team as a whole and are hotter right now because momentum is everything in the NFL, and potentially the funkiness in terms of travel and how each team handled it, I think that should end up being 23, 11, and 1. Not to give anything away, but yeah, that's pretty consistent.
Yeah, and I mean that, to me, that tracks because when you're playing this game, you're throwing both these teams in a grinder, right? You're saying we are stripping this thing down. This is football at its core. It's not pretty. It's not like you can't get as cute with stuff, as fun with stuff, but at its core, it is a structured fight. That's all these games ever are in London. It is just a brawler fight, and whichever team has more talent and wants it more tends to win. So that's usually the team who's favored.
All right, we got one more break here, and then we'll get to the back end of our show. We got that dog in us. It's the greatest time of the year again. Football is back, and it's here to stay till February. Over 1 million fans across 33 states got in the game last year by making picks on Underdog. Signing up with Underdog is smooth and easy. I especially like using their mobile app as it makes making picks easy as hell. Their gimme picks, example, you could take Brock Purdy higher than 0.5 total yards. That's a gimme. Along with their built-in multipliers, make things interesting and pretty chill. I also love the variety they have compared to other betting sites and apps such as their 4-position Battle Royale draft. Just pick players for this week and profit. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward, and signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with promo code CITY, C-I-T-Y, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pickup entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code CITY, to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus Maine and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply, void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 HOPE line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369.
Love Underdog. I've got 8 best ball drafts season long going on right now. $39 at stake. On pace to win $118. There's money to be made in those best ball leagues.
There you go. Hey, if it's good enough for Q, it's damn good enough for you. What you need to know. Just some little background, some stats, and I'm going to throw some questions at Q and see what he thinks. So the Bears-Jaguars rivalry has been played 8 times, with the Chicago Bears winning 5 games and Jacksonville Jaguars winning 3 of those games. Sunday will mark the 10th NFL regular season game at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium since 2019. 8 of the first 9 contests have been decided by 1 score, 8 points or fewer. The Bears competed in the first regular season game at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium against the Oakland Raiders on October 6, 2019, and have a 2-1 record in international contests, earning wins at Rogers Centre in Toronto, Canada in 2010, and Wembley Stadium in London in 2011. So my first question for you, is Trevor Lawrence good?
That's so hard. I mean, it shouldn't be, right? It's like, if he's good, why isn't he good, right? Like, but is Tua good? Is Joe Burrow good? Like, I think Joe Burrow's ahead of Trevor, but like they're so reliant on their rosters, and Trevor is not nearly as like the roster isn't there for him in the same way. So it's like, yeah, but no. And it, like, where I end up with Trevor Lawrence, I will always come back to, I wrote this in my keys to the game today, of watching him in the playoffs against the Chargers. Yes. That man scares me. Watching him in that regular season right before those playoffs against the Cowboys, where he was just going strike for strike with Dak Prescott against good defense, that scares me. He looked unstoppable in those games, or at least the second half of the playoff games. The first half, he threw 4 picks. But like, a guy who can do that to an NFL defense will always scare me. The consistency hasn't been there. I question what's going on with the coaching, where he was crap the first 4 games, his stats. I didn't actually sit down and watch the games, but like last week, it seemed like he might have broken out of it, maybe that was his defense being bad. But he has a skill set, and he has performed enough where I say that man will scare me anytime he's on the football field. I'm not sure that he has lived up to the billing that people had for him after that playoff performance, though, because he did a lot to cover up blemishes for Jacksonville last year. But even before the injury hit, he had the high ankle sprain he was playing on. It was like, it still felt like it wasn't living up to what it was the year before. So you start to question whether that back half of the year, I think that was 22. Yeah, 22 was when he just went on fire the second half of the season. A lot of times, half season stretches can be extremely deceiving, and it causes NFL teams to make mistakes on paying guys all the time for a back half of a season breakout. And I'm just, until I see it from Trevor again, I have to question, was that just a lucky back half of a season like Jordan Love last year, I hope was,
Yeah, you mentioned the injuries, because that's definitely important. He was on an upward trajectory until he had that high ankle sprain December 4th in 2023. He came back, but then he ended up having a concussion December 17th, 2023. That was against the Ravens. And then he had a shoulder AC joint sprain December 24th in 2023. So, that definitely held him back, but you would expect him to get back on that trajectory, at least semi. And my thought, I do not think he is bad. You could do the whole goal, the whole thing of stacking. Where is he in the top 15? Does he enter the top 10? That whole thing. There's a reason why he was paid. There's a reason why he's the only quarterback from that draft that wasn't traded to another team. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the phrase I continuously use is, he's definitely not the prince that was promised. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of excuses I feel made for Trevor, where it's like he doesn't have enough around him. And I mean, I remember that offseason where it was the offseason with Trevor Lawrence and with Justin Fields, and it was like, all right, let's build around these guys and let's see what they got. And tons of Bears fans pounding the table saying, why couldn't Justin get what Trevor was given? Christian mm-hmm. Kirk was a god for some reason, apparently. Like, I never understood that thought process, but then now all of a sudden, a year or two later, we have him say, well, that wasn't enough. He needed more. I don't know that you can have both at the same time. And a truly great quarterback elevates those around you. I mean, I'm obviously going to give flowers to the Seahawks as a whole, but I don't think there's this juggernaut around Geno, and I would say Geno is a good quarterback. Right? I mean, he's one of the best pure passers in the NFL. That's a whole thing. But the other thing with Trevor, it bothers me how docile he can be. I just feel like there are too many times where it's 1-2 check down and doesn't have enough of that Joe Burrow, enough of that Josh Allen, the screw it, I'm just going to throw this because I know I can. Like I that's not there. And I think that limits ultimately his ceiling at this point in time.
Yeah, he gets a little robotic, and it's like you just want to see him just say, screw you, I can do this. And he doesn't pull that out of his pocket enough. And that 22 season, that back half of it that I was talking about, he was doing some of that. And it was like, okay, this guy's real. But we haven't seen it since then. And to your point about some of the stuff about structure around him or the talent around him, like his O-line has consistently probably been slightly above average his whole time there as far as just pure talent, but they can never figure stuff out. And when it's hitting that point, and I'm seeing like some people say like he was a magician in the pocket, he's working the pocket so well, and that's the only reason they're surviving. And I'm just wondering, is he calling the protections? How well does he know the protections? Is that part of why the offensive line is always so sloppy? Because is he getting tricked into calling something with the protection, or is it a center issue? Is the center calling the protections? This year they got Mitch Morse there. I know if the center's calling them, there aren't many issues because he knows what he's doing. But I can't help but wonder when I see that the talent level of that offensive line and the implied performance that they're not good enough as to why that might be, because it's not adding up in my head.
One for the Bears. Has Coleman Shelton done enough the last 2 games to keep his job once Ryan Bates is back, or is this a back? I don't even know what you call an open competition over like a bye, but back to the open competition for that center position.
Man, it's so hard. I mean, I want to see what Ryan Bates can do at center at this point, and I came in the season higher on Shelton than I did Bates. I thought Shelton had more you could work with than Ryan Bates as far as being a proven center in this league who knew protections, he's a center. He's not a guard who can play center. He is a center.
He is a center.
But he's just, I have a conspiracy theory that Coleman Shelton cut weight for Shane Waldron's offense because they wanted to get really horizontal in the run game and screen game. And the horizontal stuff didn't work. And he couldn't afford to cut that weight. Because I don't remember his anchor. Like, his anchor was never good. It wasn't atrocious in LA last year. Like, it was better than we've seen it be, in my opinion. So something changed in my mind that makes him really tough to keep playing out there. Because I don't know how you fix it outside of giving him a year to put weight back on, like, or if that's even what it is. But I think that's what I'm seeing. Because I don't know how the Rams survived with him if his anchor was this bad. And ultimately, I end up saying I want to see Bates, but I hate changing the center.
Especially from a lefty to a righty.
Yeah, it really is something that matters, especially when you're switching to Ryan Bates, who hasn't been calling the protections his whole life. Or not whole life. Like, Shelton did play. I think he played all the positions at Washington before he settled at center. But he hasn't been playing it his whole professional life. You know, he hasn't been calling the protections his whole professional life. That's a real thing. James Daniels couldn't call the protections. He was a center in college. Like, Shelton can call the protections. That's valuable to me. So it's tough. I end up saying I want to at least see what Ryan Bates can do, though.
And that's where I live on that. I'm at the point where it seemed like going in this summer that the plan was Ryan Bates at center, and Poles has chased Ryan Bates for multiple years. So I want to see what the reason is for this chase. And so I'd like to see this offensive line and what more or less the construction that was planned to be like the actual week 1 line. But because we haven't had a chance to see that.
I don't know if we're going to see it with Nate Davis at this point, but
no, absolutely not. He can rot on the bench for all I care at this point. I'm just over that. If you had your druthers And injuries weren't a part of this. It was simply what you've seen on tape so far, or what you believe to be the case, whether you want to use last year into this year. What would your starting 5 offensive linemen be from left to right?
I mean, Braxton is going to start. I think Braxton he's in a gray area of like not good enough to pay, but definitely good enough to play. So like there's this that it's a tough spot to have your left tackle be, but that's where it is. He's good enough, but I'm not sure if he's where I want the left tackle to necessarily be. So Braxton starting. Tev is number 2 to me, number 2 on the offensive line. He's had a really rough year this year. He looked awesome against Carolina for whatever that's worth. I mean, if we're hyping up Bill Murray over his Carolina performance, we need to feel good about Tev's too. That's just the way it has to work, because he was right there with him from a dominance standpoint. And then at center, I mean, it's Coleman Shelton until Bates proves to me it's not, unfortunately. Like I in my rankings, because I rank every offensive lineman who's played enough snaps. Coleman Shelton is 7 and Ryan Bates is 8 right now. So it's like I didn't like what I saw from Ryan Bates week 1, but he also has to have a better anchor. So it ends up it's a toss up. But for now, I'm going to stick with Shelton until Bates shows me a reason not to, which I want to give him the opportunity to show that. And then at right guard, I mean, it's Matt Pryor until I see something more from Bill Murray. If I see more from Bill Murray, I might get pulled that way.
Bill Murray's stands are dying right now.
But you know what, though? Bill Murray doesn't have an elite trait. That's just the facts of the NFL. Matt Pryor has an elite trait. He also has very unelite traits, like his hand speed, his foot speed, his length gives him issues being inside at guard. Like he gets tripped up quite a bit, but he can freaking kill somebody in a phone booth, and that matters. He's taking so much energy out of defensive tackles when he's just chucking them on the ground when the Bears are running power in the end zone, and he's just plowing them. Him and Darnell Wright combined are just killing people on the goal line right now, and it's a lot of fun to watch. And that takes stuff out of players, that takes stamina away, that has a real effect on the game. And I think the Bears are building something of an identity in their running offense between Tev, Pryor, and Wright being bullies that they can lean into. And that's something that I want to see if they can do that more, because 3 of their 5 offensive linemen are bullies. So let them bully people.
Last question before we move on to our next category. The Jaguars have Josh Hines-Allen, used to be Josh Allen, if people are confused by that, Trayvon Walker, Eric Armstead, and old friend Roy Robertson-Harris playing on the D-line, but ranked 24th in sacks with 11. Why can't they get after the quarterback?
Because they don't have a defensive tackle on the roster. Not an NFL-worthy one. I mean, Eric Armstead and Roy Robertson-Harris, sure, you can say they're D tackles. More than half their snaps have come head up on the tackle or further outside. So, they're not really D tackles, are they? They're rotating at edge. You don't feel good about either guy playing inside against the run. So at that point, they're a DeMarcus Walker type player, which is a defensive end who can kick inside, not a defensive tackle who can kick outside on occasion. So I think that how much they're reliant on the edges, you can just, if you're playing quarterbacks, you know how to step up in the pocket, guys are just stepping up out of it. So I think that their room does scare me as a Bears fan, because all 4 of those guys are power players with length, which is what gives Braxton Jones issues, which has given Darnell Wright a little more issue than I'd like to admit this year, because of injuries that he's protecting, or his anchor isn't quite, especially at the start of games, his anchor is not quite where we want it to be. His flexibility is not quite where you want it to be. Mid-game, he's usually back to normal, and late in the game, you can see it start to go away again. So, all 4 of those guys being power players does worry me a little.
Yeah, it's funny when you go to PFF, because I was trying to figure out snap counts and all that, and you do base versus nickel. They list in base, right? They have Azizi Otoemo as one of their base interior linemen, and Devon Hamilton, who both have not graded out well, 54 and 44. Hamilton, has played 152 snaps, but if you look over at his easy, I mean, he's only done 59 snaps. And then when you switch over to nickel, that's where you really, all of a sudden Roy Robertson Harris and Armstead dropping down, like you said, but DeMarcus Ware role, and they have a lot more snaps there. But like you said, they tend to go out more, and it's a weird line. It's a weird construction. I don't understand it, and it was kind of hard for me. I was trying to piece it all together and then pair it with the tape. It's just odd. It's very odd.
Yeah, their entire team has only played, what is that, 53 A-gap snaps all season. Like they don't have the horses on the interior, and that has to be impacting their pass rush in some ways.
That'll blend into our love it, hate it, rehabilitate it. This is where we pick a matchup, a dynamic that we love for the Bears, one that we hate, and one that we'd fix. My love, just because we kind of talked about it, the Bears being able to get what they want up the middle at all three levels. I already mentioned some of those grades, but even if you look at Roy Robertson Harris, he graded out at 55.5, Eric Armstead at 61.1. In terms of linebacker, Ventrell Miller is 50.4, Chad Muma, who goes off in nickel, 55.7. They have Devin Lloyd, 76.2. Very good. He's a good player.
And even Lloyd, I noticed some stuff on tape from last week. He was biting hard on play action, which opened up seams behind him. That might be a coaching point. Like they might want him coming hard down at play action, but like it was there. It was there multiple times in the first half of that game.
And then when you even drop to safety, Andre Cisco is a 42.8, Antonio Johnson's a 41.4. Like just literally that cylinder up the middle just has not been good for this Jaguars team. And that's saying something because their corners haven't been great either. So I think whether it's runs up the middle, whether you're trying to hit, some of your seam routes, whether you're trying to attack deep, you're, on posts, things of that nature, a dig route, I think you're going to be able to do what you want to do against this team. Yeah,
I will say Andre Cisco, I consider a gambling ball hawk. Like he's going to get burned. He's also going to get picks. Like it's going to go both ways. And I think so far this year, it's gone extremely in the burned way, but I do think he's going to get interceptions this year because it's what he's done every year of his career.
Yeah. What is your love?
Montez Sweat versus Anton Harrison. This is Montez Sweat is going to line up over the right tackle the whole time. Anton Harrison, late first or early second round tackle out of Oklahoma last year. 66 best PFF graded offensive tackle right now. And I'm not just relying on PFF grades on this. When I didn't love Harrison in the draft last year, I liked his skill set enough. I liked his tape enough to say like, yeah, he's probably a late first to like second round pick. But he was a clear like step below the other guys. And it was because I just felt like he was a finesse football player. He had some power traits, but he didn't use them very well or very often. And when you're talking about a finesse blocker, Sweat's made a habit of winning against finesse blockers throughout his career. It's what he does. So like this is the Montez Sweat game in my mind.
Well, that is certainly exciting. Why don't you continue? What do you hate?
Braxton Jones versus Josh Hines Allen. I mean, I was talking about the power rushers here. Hines Allen weighs 255 pounds. He has a solid bull rush. So 255, it's not necessarily heavy on the edge, but it's not light either. And if you play with good leverage, good speed to power, which he does, that can be a load to handle. When Braxton Jones technique, I'm not sure if this is a Chris Morgan thing because you see Darnell Wright playing with the same technique, but Darnell Wright has the anchor to play this way. Braxton doesn't, where they just essentially give the edge rusher their chest and they wrap their arms around the shoulder pads. The old Packers hug block technique, right?
Yeah.
Like, so Braxton doesn't have the anchor to play that way, but he does. And I last week he showed more signs of playing with more proactive hands to prevent guys from getting in his chest. But it was still more reps than not of playing with that technique, which I don't understand that technique unless you have a massive anchor. But ultimately, I think Josh Hines Allen, he can make you pay for playing that technique if you're Braxton Jones. So I hope he has some answers this week. But that's the matchup that I don't know how you get by.
Yeah, I mean, just even let alone that matchup in general, I just am concerned with Braxton. It's just a precipitous drop off from what we saw last year. I mean, he's never been like the question always was like, is he a guy you pay? But at least that was the question last year. It's like, is he? So
After
far,
week 1 last year, my answer was yes, and then he got hurt, and it hasn't felt the same.
And it just hasn't felt the same. And this year in particular, it's just now for me, it's just been no. It's just been straight no. So my hates, not a lot that I hate honestly about this matchup, but one that I had to pick one was just the Elijah Hicks playing deep half, deep third. And yes, that's more his game. I'm just concerned about the lapses that he tends to have when you have a guy like a Brian Thomas who you can't have that lapse because he just has game breaking speed. And he's done it week in and week out. I'm going to touch on that a little bit more on my X factors, but it's a concern for me.
Okay, I have a note to add with Brian Thomas, but I'll wait for you to talk your X factors first.
Rehabilitate. I would say, so in week 5, Caleb Williams' air to the sticks value was negative 1.8, right? So air to the sticks, according to Next Gen Stats, shows the amount of air yards ahead or behind the first down marker on all pass attempts for a passer. It indicates if the passer is attempting his passes past the first down marker or if he's relying on his skill position players to make yards after catch. Now, you combine the fact that who you have, right? DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore, even Keenan Allen to an extent, and definitely with Rome. When you have those guys, those are yards after catch individuals. And you also have been running a lot of screens, so that's going to reduce this number. But I would like to see the ball pushed a bit more. I want a little bit more, I want to a little bit past the sticks, and not having to rely so much on those screens and the yards after catch. Just give me a little more oomph is all I'm looking for.
Yeah, my rehabilitate is essentially the same thing with a little different twist on it. It's the Caleb Jerome deep ball. There were a few missed opportunities, whether they were turn downs or win concerns or whatever you want to think that it might have been as to why the deep ball wasn't thrown. There were a few last week. If I'm the coaching staff, I'm gearing up to hit some of those against this Jacksonville defense. I'm saying we just saw Alec Pierce go off for like 150 yards against this defense because he runs a 4.3 and is big and can just like win downfield. I think Rome can do that too. So there's no reason why Rome can't get at least one deep ball hit this game.
Next, X factor for the Jaguars. And also really quick, not really Hank Aaron. Claws up is not stupid. I'm sorry. That's a stupid take. Claws up is cool. Get out of here.
I like the way it mixes with bear down. Like I do guys like it goes really well together from that aspect.
Absolutely. My X factor for the Jaguars is to create pressure on Caleb Williams and to be a little creative with how they do it. Over the past 2 weeks, Caleb was 17 for 19, 200 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 0 turnover-worthy plays. So, of course, those are going to be plays, not just interceptions or things of that nature, but ones that they consider to potentially be an issue against the blitz. So that's pretty darn good. And obviously, yes, the last 2 weeks, you have to factor in who you're playing, the Rams and the Panthers. You're always that matters, but you can only play who's on your schedule. They have to be able to try to create pressure like he was seeing in the first couple of weeks to have really any chance, because he is reading defenses better. He's getting the ball out to his playmakers. And if they can't create that pressure, there's no way that they're going to be able to win this game.
Yeah, my X factor is similar. It's the edge rotation getting home with their power between Hines Allen, Trayvon Walker. And I count Roy Robb and Eric Armstead as edge rushers for this aspect. Even when they're at D tackle, Jaguars like to play a lot of wide splits where he might be a D tackle who's head up on the offensive tackle. That could be a stunt of him going right at the offensive tackle. So to me, that's a D tackle, but basically those 4 guys match up on the offensive tackles, needs to be able to get home with power.
X factor for the Bears. For them, contain the explosive plays. Jaguars can't really sustain drives like I mentioned earlier. They need players like Brian Thomas, like Tank Bigsby. At one point in time, Travis Etienne, he just hasn't done it as much to break big plays. So, for example, in week 5, Brian Thomas had an 85-yard touchdown reception where he reached a top speed of 22.15 miles per hour. Tank Bigsby had a 65-yard touchdown run where he reached a top speed of 20.93 miles per hour. Special teams even is a bit of that. Devin Duvernay had a 53-yard punt return last week. So when you bring all that together, right, they need those big chunks. A lot of teams do, to be fair, but especially just with how this Jaguars offense is constructed, how they operate, they need the big plays. And, Brian Thomas is number one for me. If you're going to stop one person right now, for me, it's him.
So it's really interesting the way their offense is structured to me. It's because Brian Thomas is not their X receiver. He's not running a vertical route tree consistently. He's running a lot of shorter stuff for a lot of the game, while Gabe Davis is their true X.
Yeah.
Because Gabe Davis runs like 3 routes and they're all vertical. And that's all he really does. He's good at those 3, but that's all he's got in his bag, and he runs like a 4.55. So it's like it's a weird combo, but he's just good at running a vertical stem. So you need to respect Gabe Davis because he's good at doing that. When you start to sleep on him, that's when he hits one. But when you start to pull off a Brian Thomas, because you're saying this guy's running all short stuff, like the corner can handle it, that's when they go deep to Brian Thomas. Like, so that they've done a really nice job of easing Brian Thomas into that role, of not making him your vertical X, of making him a secondary thought because of the vertical threat that Gabe Davis poses and the vertical threat that Christian Kirk poses. Because my X factor for the Bears here is similar, along the same lines, just a little more specific, I guess. It's actually Kyler Gordon against Christian Kirk. Being able to fill run lanes consistently, because as a nickel corner, you're essentially a linebacker in run fits, right? So he needs to be able to get downhill and make these tackles when Jaquan Brisker isn't behind him to help, and you got to trust Elijah Hicks behind you. That gets tougher. But at the same time, Christian Kirk is such a vertical threat out of the slot, which you don't see that often. You don't see guys running his speed in the slot all that often because they don't have the skill set to get off the line of scrimmage as often. But with Christian Kirk there, he also needs to be able to follow to the deep portions of the field against a guy who's faster than him. So he needs to have his head on a swivel and be very aware, because he's not going to be getting the help, because you got to worry about Brian Thomas. You got to worry about Gabe Davis. I really like the structure of this wide receiver room.
I mean, there's a reason why the Jaguars not just beat the Colts, but I mean, they hung up a good chunk of points on them last week, right? This isn't, and also Doug Peterson isn't an idiot. I mean, I don't think he's the greatest head coach in the world anymore in terms of just maybe locker room management and some of the decisions that he makes. But, he is a good offensive coach in terms of deploying the weapons that he has.
Yeah, he can play a good chess match.
All right. Over unders. First one coming at you. Total points in this game, over under 44.5.
Oh, okay. I don't think I gave enough thought to this section. I was just like, give me the Bears team total over 23.5. Boom. Great. The total on the game, I'm going over. I feel like there's too many explosive threats between both teams for it to go under, but I also feel like every single London game I've ever watched ends up 23-22 or something. So like it's, well, I guess 23-22 would be overs, or like 21-17. But yeah, 23-22 is over. Give me over.
The under has hit 5 times in a row in these London games. So, I mean, your feeling is absolutely right. Usually it's some weird 17-12 game.
Mm-hmm.
How about Caleb Williams passing yards? 237.5. I don't know why I said 7.
Give me the over, because if he's slinging it and they're good, they're going to use it like last week. It's going to be live practice. And if they're not good out the gate, he's going to need to throw to come back. So give me the over.
Other side of the field, Trevor Lawrence passing yards, 230.5.
Give me the under. I think they're going to lean into the run game. And he's only done that once this year. I think maybe twice. I think he might have had 241 game, but like he hasn't. He's been in the 180s, 190s a lot this year.
I was blown away because I pulled these from a certain site. I was blown away that was the number. Roshan Johnson rushing touchdowns. The goal line back, not Khalil Herbert, as Shane Waldron said a couple weeks ago. 1.5.
Give me the under. He had 2 last week in a game where they scored 30-something, and I'm not sure if the Bears are scoring 30-something this week, and I think at least 1 touchdown is an explosive. So give me the under.
I think that's fair. Let's see. Brian Thomas receptions over 30 yards, 1.5.
Under. He might get 1, but I don't think he gets 2 down. Like, if he gets two, one of them needs to be a screen or a short one that he breaks, like maybe he breaks an Elijah Hicks tackle or something, or makes him miss. But I trust the tackling on this defense. I don't think they get burned downfield twice by the same guy.
Bears turnovers forced 1.5.
Over. These games are weird. I mean, I think they might turn the ball over twice too, but like these games just have weird moments where it's just like, how'd that ball even get out? Oh, it was just a slippery football, I guess. Like weird stuff happens in London games.
I feel like it's always something like the ball, like it was thrown, hit off the hands, it hit off another player's helmet, and then landed in the hands of the linebacker. It's just always weird, funky stuff like that. This is a pick 'em. Leader in touches between Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby for the Jaguars.
Tank. I think Tank earned it last week for them. I think Etienne has had 2 years to really earn it, or 3 years maybe, to really earn it. The first year he was injured, so I guess that's probably 3. And it really hasn't happened. Like he's had moments, but I feel like the consistency has never been there. And you felt like last week you might have seen a running back in Tank Bigsby who might be there pretty consistently.
I think that's valid. All right. Bear gut check game predictions. We use our gut feelings, revitalized by Kombucha, of course, to give our game predictions. Go ahead, use code BEARGUTCHECK at kombucha.com in order to get 11% off of your order. First one, Jaguars versus Bears in London. Bears favored at 2.5.
Oh, I got the Bears. Bears minus 2.5. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think they just win outright. I mean, I think at this point in time, we talked about momentum. The Bears have it. The Jaguars, they're coming off a win, so they're going to have a little bit, but just as a whole, in terms of how you're feeling, I think the vibes are a bit better right now with that Bears team. The travel is going to be weird for the Jaguars, obviously, so that's part of it. And I just think the Bears right now are a better team.
Yeah, I mean, for any gamblers out there know this, 2.5 is a prime number. Like that is what you are seeking when you can get a team that you feel like should be favored at 2.5. That's almost an auto bet. Like it's hard to turn that one down. And sometimes when you see it, you almost wonder if it's a rat line where you're like, this smells like a rat. Why is this only 2.5? This should be at least 3. Why is Vegas giving me the hook? Like, why they shouldn't be giving me this? And it's probably the London factor there. I got them at 3.5 yesterday for the Shaving Points podcast, my gambling podcast. Like that was, I bet them minus 3.5 because I do think they win this game by more than a field goal.
There we go. Tonight's game, 49ers at Seahawks. The 49ers are favored by 3.5.
This is a game that I did not want to bet when I talked it yesterday. I'm probably leaning towards 49ers, but man, it's in Seattle. And Seattle just does weird stuff in their division. They find ways to win games they shouldn't at home. So it makes it a really tough game for me to predict. But ultimately, the 49ers are not off to the start they want to. They're a well-coached team. They have plenty of talent. I have to go 49ers if I'm forced to pick.
I mean, yeah, like you said, the 49ers have had just a couple of really weird losses, and I think that team as a whole and the coaching staff as a whole is too good to have it happen too many times versus right now with Seattle, you have a new head coach that's there. I think he's a great head coach, or I think he's going to be a good head coach, but, he's still finding his footing a little bit and also keeps playing the run really weird. I don't understand. It's like the way that they're setting up the defense right now, you could do that when you have Roquan Smith at linebacker. You can't do that right now with what Seahawks have. So I don't know if they're going to change that this week or not. I would agree with 49ers.
I think I like the over in that game more than anything.
Yeah, just a pure shootout.
Yeah.
Commanders at Ravens. The Bears will have a bye coming off of London, but then they will go and play the Washington Commanders. I am so excited for that game for a plethora of reasons, but Ravens are favored by 6.5.
This was probably one of my more confident bets of the week. And to be clear, I tend to err too much on the side of what I perceive as talent and not enough towards vibes and culture. And when I look at Washington's roster, they are 100% running on vibes and culture right now. So Ravens minus 6.5, again, feels like a rat line. Feels ratty. I'm like, it smells. why am I getting Ravens at home without under 7 with this talent deficiency? So I am a little worried about that, but ultimately I have to take it. I'm Ravens -6.5.
The Survivor pool I'm in started at 1,700 people. I'm down to 29. I'm one of the last 29 in there. I was deciding between this game to pick the Ravens and picking the Falcons over the Panthers, just because at this point picking against Panthers just seems like a good call. I'm leaning towards going Falcons, but it was I almost went Ravens.
Kudos to you, man. It is a brutal year to be in Survivor. I do one with my father-in-law and my brother-in-law every year. Where like we buy 3 and we just kind of all strategize how to do the picks. Week 1, we all did Bengals.
Ooh.
Out the door. We get in another league. We get in another one, and then we're like, okay, we're gonna do the Ravens. No way Ravens can lose to the Raiders. Just like last year we were the top 3 in like 100-person one. Like it was brutal this year.
You're just sitting there thinking, like, do I know anything about ball?
Yeah.
Like, I swear I know about ball.
Yeah, how do I put this much time into it and be this wrong? Like
All right, last couple of games here we got to pick. Cardinals at Packers. Packers are favored by 5.5.
So it's just a lean on this one. And the Shaving Points podcast motto this year is don't sleep on the Cardinals. They're our against the spread team. We think they're going to keep crushing against the spread this year. They did last year. So lean towards the Cardinals. I just hate betting against the Packers at Lambeau. So that does worry me.
And then lastly, Lions at Cowboys. Lions favored by 3.
I don't like the number on this one at 3.
Yeah.
Why am I betting for a push? Like this feels like a 3-point game to me, and it's at 3. If I'm gonna lean one way, it's probably the Lions because the Cowboys are so banged up right now, and the Lions are out for blood. They felt cheated last year in Dallas. They're probably out for blood. I don't doubt that Dan Campbell has not slept this week just watching that game on repeat. So lean towards the Lions. I love the over in this game, though.
Ooh, they're over. All right, last couple categories. Then we're going to wrap it up here. A Coccyx and Bull story. This is our bold prediction section. What do you have?
Keenan Allen, 100-plus receiving yards.
I literally have that written down, right?
All right. He hasn't gone over 33 all year. I mean, he's only played, 3 games, but matched up with either Jerry and Jones or Darnell Savage in the slot. I think, if I remember right, Darnell Savage with the Packers, his issues were more at the safety spot than actually in the slot. He was actually a pretty solid slot receiver, but even so, I think Keenan Allen's due. I think that this Jaguars defense probably feels like complete crap. Their coaching is probably, we are not giving up another explosive play this year. I think they're going to play very conservatively, and that means there's going to be a lot of opportunities in the underneath for Keenan's option routes. I think there's a lot of opportunity for him this week.
And I think if you go back and watch that game against the Panthers, there's a couple opportunities, whether he was open and he just was the second or third option and Caleb threw to the first successfully, or a couple routes that were just about to break, that you just were like, you have a feeling that Keenan is about to have a game that's like that. Now, could that be this game? Could it be Commanders coming up? Either one. But I have a good feeling about him in this game. Offensive player of the game. This might be redundant for you. Who do you have?
Keenan Allen. I think Keenan Allen is going to have a big day. I think that his veteran presence out there in a game that has a lot more unknowns than most of these guys are used to, especially a guy like, I think Odunze might, it's going to be a weird moment for him in this game. He's just getting used to the NFL, let alone traveling to London for an NFL game. And I just think that some of these other wide receivers need to start getting more involved than DJ. So I think Keenan Allen, it's his week.
And I'm saying, just to probably be a little different here, I'll say Cole Kmet, just because he can also potentially fill that role that we just talked about with Keenan and some of those short routes, things like that. And I would also potentially like the more timely ones, right? It's a 3rd and 6. You got to have it. So far, Cole has kind of been that guy, if you look at that. Even if he hasn't had some of he had that one game, it was wild. It was like 10 catches on 11 targets. But he's been a very timely reception in the last couple of games.
I think that's a fair one. When I was looking at the explosive plays, it seemed like they gave up 1 or 2 a game to a tight end.
Defensive player of the game. I have an idea of who this might be for you. Who is it?
Tez, Montez Sweat. I really like the matchup for him. I think that, like I said earlier, Anton Harrison feels like a finesse pass protector to me and not a guy who's really going to get after it physically in the run game either. I think that's a guy who Tez can have a day against.
I'm going to say Kevin Byard. I just feel like Trevor is going to want to push the ball a little bit. He's going to feel the pressure to, really produce. First, it's basically London's a second home game for these Jaguars at this point. Maybe feeling a little good coming off that Colts game. And Byard had a beautiful interception last week. I expect that he has a good chance to be able to repeat a performance like that, a couple pass breakups as needed, and really be the guy that is that safety valve on the back.
Yeah, I think that, Kevin Byard, this is a game for him to step up a little. He's going to have to cover more ground, and it, might have to turn the dial back a few years this week because he's going to be needed a little more.
And lastly, King of the North, aka our MVP. Rule of the show is you're only allowed to pick Caleb Williams once the entire season. So, and I don't know how many shows you'll be on in the future, but if you want, you could use it now.
I'm going Tez. I really
fair.
think that this is a game where Tez gets maybe 2 sacks, maybe a forced fumble in there, a couple run stuffs. Like I think Tez is going to be a key point this week and really important for the Bears if they're going to win this game. I think Montez needs to have a day.
Again, just to be a little different, I'm going to go with Tremaine Edmonds. I'm going to say that he ends up getting a very timely turnover. Now, I'm not saying he'll cause it. I think it's going to be one of those weird TJ Edwards goes in for the tackle and the ball pops up and Tremaine's like, oh, look, that's great. He'll get one of those and then he'll have a couple pass breakups across the middle because that's just what he does. And that we'll look back on this game and say, okay, he was a very important, especially because we're talking about how important stopping the run is going to be. And you need him to step up, not just TJ, who's usually the tackle machine.
I will say one thing as I'm just thinking it through. Florida boys tend to do well against Florida teams.
Ooh.
So maybe you get a Tyreek Stevenson day or something like that.
I would absolutely love that. All right, Q. That's all we got. Thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Like I said, it's not just friend of the podcast. It's coming more of a true relation just because of how often you're able to come in here and help us out when, we need a pinch hitter. And it's not even just a pinch hitter, but being able to lean on you for the offensive line conversation, being able to lean on you for some of the betting conversation. It's an awesome resource to have. So I can't thank you enough. Where can people find all your stuff? Because they need to be listening, by the way, wearing a hat, shaving points. They're awesome. It's a great pod.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me on. You can find my work on the Shaving Points podcast. We go once a week, all year long. We'll talk NFL draft when it's draft season. During the season, we talk every single game in the NFL. Every week, we give you a short form podcast that's like 15 minutes. We try to keep it 15 minutes. Sometimes it squeaks up to 20, but where we just give you like one-liners about why we like a game or why we don't. And then we have an hour to hour and a half episode where we actually dive into every game. And also on the Bears on Tap podcast on YouTube, we also do the O-line breakdowns. Myself and Ron Luce will sit there, pull the all 22 up. We have the, marker out on the screen showing what we're thinking, what we're seeing. If you're lucky, you'll see Ron demonstrate a pass set on the camera, which is always fun. And my writing over at ontapsportsnet.com. You can find my O-line articles over there. You can find my keys to victory every week. In the off season, I'll do draft coverage over there as well.
All right, everyone. That's all we got. Remember, 8:30 a.m. start for that Bears game on Sunday. Set your alarms. Have your coffee ready. I'm not a coffee drinker. I think it's gross. But whatever your morning routines are, have to edit that a little bit for this week. Bear down.